let's move on to another one for you. I think we were going to talk about Evie, and I think she's in Australia.
Yeah, she was
so other side of the world.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we had to time the calls each week fairly carefully, and she was a busy mum, two lively girls. So we definitely had to schedule things quite carefully. But it's a good one to talk about next to Maggie's and Carly's, because on the surface it's stomach pain, and H. pylori's got a role to play, but it's a completely individual situation, and I suppose you've got to, like you say, you've got to look at the patterns, look at the objective information, the subjective information, and try and work it out. Because I think if we just carried out the same stuff as we did with someone else with apparently the same situation, I don't think she would have been as successful particularly. She had already identified H. pylori, a bit like Maggie had already, and she tried some treatments. And kind of similar in that she'd actually done some testing, done endoscopies, identified H. pylori, was pretty clear that this was one of the reasons why, or the reason why she had stomach pain, and she had triple therapy. And she actually felt better at this point. And this was about 1.5 years before we were really working together or anything like that. So she was describing this time of going, right, this happened a little while ago, stomach pain, went to the doctor, did tests, took the medication, felt better. And so it also seems, well, that's great. But then she felt better for kind of 2 months. And then she had a period of stress in her life. And then a stomach discomfort just immediately back to the forefront. And then went back to the doctors and just took the triple therapy again, because it kind of felt pretty successful in the first place. So they decided to do it again. But this time it just didn't impact. It kind of didn't have the same kind of, that's better. That's taken the pain away kind of thing. And she'd done another follow-up test, and the H. pylori was still there. So there was this perception that the drugs didn't work kind of thing. And you could sort of really criticize the drugs, I suppose, as saying, well, they didn't work. You have to do something else. But in some ways, maybe they had helped her body and eradicated the H. pylori. Is it something about her environment? Is it something about other lifestyle factors and things going on in her body, which is allowing the H. pylori back in, actually being exposed to it again? Or is it increasing in its levels, being opportunistic again? And these kinds of questions. So instead of just saying the drugs don't work, it's more just saying, well, why is, even with extra help from antibiotics and things like that, can your body not solve this? So that's what we were a little bit more kind of interested in. And she was totally on board there with this. I mean, that was basically the question that she had for us, really, for me. She said, what else is going on? I'm very, very busy, but I'm prepared to try and manage some things and do things a little bit differently. So we said we thought we could help her. First few days of the program in, like literally 2 or 3 days or so, her stomach pain is reducing. And all she's done is a bit like you said for Maggie. She'd gone gluten-free. She'd like reduced gluten out of her diet a lot. And actually also reduced some of her own supplements, because she was taking quite a few nutrients for this and vitamins and minerals and things like this to try and help these, not just pain, but her energy that was struggling and things. So a few days in, few changes to nutrition, more clarity, less stressed in herself, more energy, less pain. And she said, after a few days, this is as good as I've felt in 6 months, like since when the medications made me feel better that time, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we took steps a bit like yourself with Maggie for being antimicrobial for H. pylori and things like that. But she described to me how she basically felt like H. pylori for 1.5 years had been like her middle name. So it was like her identity. That's what would dictate what she did that day, because of this H. pylori diagnosis kind of thing, and she kind of labeled herself with it. So we did a bit of work just to say, well, you don't need to do that anymore, kind of thing. Just you get some information, you take your steps, but it doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be about H. pylori. So she felt like the pressure ease like massively from that in her daily life, it seemed. And she focused on other things like nutrition. She started to notice, she started doing the smart work, basically. She would come to me and say, I've noticed something else. I've now see the wood for the trees a little bit. I can tell you that I don't digest nuts very well. I'm not doing very well when I eat spinach and things. I was only eating those things because I thought they were healthy and things like that. But she was...
again, sorry to interrupt there. There's two massively important points that you've raised that I'll just weigh in with, just in case you don't cover them.
Please do.
That sometimes people start to identify with their illness or symptoms or diagnosis, and it almost becomes them. Like you say, the identity revolves around that. You'll see on social media, there are people out there who call themselves the migraine king or the chronic pain princess. And this is where, again, higher minded health comes in, because we're talking about psychological associations with either illness or wellness. There are psychologists out there who know, and many medical doctors know this, that we can start to identify in terms of those symptoms, and almost like, so who are you? What do you do? Oh, well, I'm such and such, and I have X disease or whatever. It's almost like becomes the most important thing to the person. We don't have time to go into the psychology around that, but it's very, very interesting. I always ask people questions, if they come along and say, I have H. pylori, or I have rheumatoid arthritis, or I have fatigue, or I have. Mm-hmm. I then suggest to them that they reframe that and say, H. pylori actually has you. Mm-hmm. Because it's like you just said, it was dictating her life.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have it. It's owning her. It's possessing her, if you like. So reframing that and saying, instead of saying I have this, I have that, it's actually, for me, needs to be the other way around. The symptoms have the person. Mm-hmm. There is a very interesting psychological relationship in some people, not everybody, with the way that they associate with whatever condition they have. The other thing is the idea of the healthy foods causing problems. No food is inherently healthy or unhealthy, really, if we look at it philosophically. Again, that's another conversation for another day. But many of the foods that are out there being touted as being healthy, like spinach and nuts in this particular case, can actually be disastrous for people. Yep. You'd be better off eating ready meals in some cases that don't have those foods in than cooking those foods whole and fresh, or eating them whole and fresh if they don't agree. So from a nutritional perspective, your nutrition, if you're listening and watching, needs to be individualized to you, really, and not, you don't want to be subordinating, in our opinion, to the idea of some guru telling you that a certain food is good or bad, because it's very individual. So sorry for that interjection. I just wanted to mention those 2 points, and I'll fire the ball back across into your court.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. What Evie did with her nutrition was actually just simplify it based on trying to take notice of how she was doing on food. Take the judgment out of the shoulds and the shouldn'ts, and I'm doing this because it's healthy, kind of thing. Just start from scratch, and just make a change based on some individual information you've got, and that could be from the body. I've just eaten those nuts and I feel terrible. Well, don't ignore that, kind of thing. The only reason you would ignore it if you're subordinated to the idea that it couldn't possibly do you any harm, kind of thing. So she actually just ended up simplifying her diet. Just became simpler. She stopped overcomplicating it, and every step she made, she found out how more things about food that would help her thrive and not cause challenges. And I also identified things that would cause challenges, and you just do less of those things. So it really was fairly simple in that kind of principle. Regarding the H. pylori being just like that kind of label kind of thing, we used an analogy when we were kind of discussing that topic that worked quite nicely for her, because it was like she'd gone to the cinema, bought a ticket a bit too late, and could only sit in the front row. So she was sitting real up close to the screen. And when you're too close, it strains your eyes, it strains your neck. You can only really focus on this bit. It's difficult to see the peripheral sort of part of it. So you're not getting that whole experience of the sound and the cinematics of it and the whole thing. So we basically just said, well, what you want to do here for this to solve these health challenges, get up out of that seat and go and sit further back in the theatre and enjoy watching that kind of film. So you can actually take in that whole scene, not just like the bit that's right in front of your face kind of thing. And she did have pain in her neck as well, and things like this, and headaches and all of this stuff. Just coincidentally. So that's kind of what she did in terms of her nutrition, and like we said, some antimicrobial steps as well. And just so it doesn't sound sort of rose tinted, over these 6 months or so, she had a few challenges. She had urinary infections, throat infections. She lost her voice for a bit. That made some of the calls interesting, and things like that. So she had challenges along the way that weren't planned whatsoever. It's like, these are new, this is extra, connected for sure, but she had to develop skills to deal with what was in front of her as well. So the support took on different angles, not just about sort of stomach pain and things like this.
Yeah. So something so simple as stomach pain being caused by H. pylori, and her belief that H. pylori is running the show and that she's doing everything she can nutritionally, all of a sudden there's a huge shift in perception just from being exposed to another angle or a series of other angles. You know, step back, take a much broader view of what's going on. Let's not subordinate to what we think we should and should not be doing according to nutrition. And I think the lab testing really helps people with that as well, because there was a high anti-gliadin IgA on the stool test, which indicates gluten sensitivity of some sort. It doesn't diagnose celiac disease or anything, but it certainly suggests that people need to really watch out with gluten. And she also had quite a lot of other bacteria overgrowing in the stool test, right? There was bacillus, there was staphylococcus, a whole range of different microbes. Morganella was elevated in there, and also a parasite, Pseudomonas was in there, parasite Pentatrichomonas, which has been associated with diarrhea as well. So there was a lot going on in there. But again, going back to how we're interpreting the tests, we're not saying that one of those bugs is causing all the symptoms. There's a whole bunch of imbalances in the GI tract that need to be dealt with through time, using foods, using nutrition, anti-inflammatory substances and what have you, and maybe some herbs and supplements to kill off the bad bugs and what have you. But nobody can say, oh, well, X is causing Y. What we're looking at is the patterns in the test, what that means, how we're going to deal with all of those things. And over time, she did a really good job of that, along with you and your help, of course. Now, just looking at the specific symptoms, because we didn't list those down, she had bloating, stomach pains every day, diarrhea, feeling full quickly when she ate, very light sleep, feeling tired and needing a nap at 3 p.m., very common, difficulty catching breath, pounding heart, sense of weakness, aching muscles, low back pain, involuntary loss of urine, salty cravings, sweet cravings, dizzy standing up, dark circles under the eyes, catching colds frequently, headaches, itchy skin, nose congested, concentrating, feeling depressed and anxious, upset and angry, and low libido. And they nearly all improved again. So, I mean, that's crazy. There's got to be 30 symptoms there. I haven't counted them.
I know.
All 30 symptoms, all coming from fundamental imbalances in the GI tract, from the nutrition and the psychological associations with those particular symptoms that are stressful and probably causing a snowball effect, if you like. So well done on that one, mate. That was a good case study. Really nice one. And all of that stuff gone in 6 months. No quick fix. There's no medication on the planet that a doctor could have given to alleviate that. There's no surgery that could have been done to alleviate all those problems without causing huge issues. All it took was a little bit of care and attention, and changing the client's perception around her health, really, and then taking the specific action steps that were indicated by the lab work.